The Celestia Code, Chapter 5 Into the Ruins. You were really pretty hard on that changeling, Twilight, Jigsaw said, her voice heavily laden with sarcasm. We were back at the camp above the canyon. A known location gave me a reliable teleport target, and though it took quite a bit of energy to cover the distance, I thought it was worth it. I was heating a third kettle of water to finish off the job of getting the disgusting green goop out of our hair. As I said, I reminded her, I gave my word that I wouldn't hurt her. Oh, I don't know, maybe she would have preferred a few broken limbs to a stern talking to and being sent home with a note for her mother. Jigsaw tossed the dirty clothes she had been using to clean herself down with quite a bit more force than was necessary. Still, she really thought you were going to stomp her there for a second. That's something. I sighed. I could understand Jigsaw's anger. I could understand it because my own had been on a rather volcanic scale. But I wasn't just any pony anymore. I was a princess of Equestria, and that meant I had to think of the benefit to all ponies, and not just how good it would have been to feel that disgusting parasite's chitin cracking under my hoofs. Her mother is the queen of the changelings, and the note is a diplomatic communication. So you said. Jigsaw didn't look up as she spoke. An official protest. My, how that must have stung. I was getting a little bit angry myself at that point. Look, I know how frightened you must have been, and I understand that you wanted revenge on that thing, but... While I was talking, Jigsaw walked around the fire and looked down to where our two bedrolls lay side by side. She glanced up at me, but when she saw that I was looking at her, she turned her head, avoiding my gaze. She lifted her blankets, moved them to the other side of the fire, then went and lay down on them. Like stepping out of a nice hot sauna into a cold pool, I went shockingly from anger to deep embarrassment. I wasn't even sure exactly why. Talking didn't seem to be doing any good, so I decided to try not talking. I finished cleaning up, wrapping myself in my own bedroll, and pretended to sleep. Twilight! I must have fallen asleep at some point. I wouldn't have been capable of being rudely awakened. What? I jumped up, scattering my blankets and looking wildly around for signs of imminent peril. The sun was fairly well up in the sky, and Jigsaw was shaking a piece of paper in my face. I snapped into action with an immediate assessment of the situation. 1. I blinked and said, Huh? This. Jigsaw kept waving the piece of paper, so I couldn't really see what it was. This is a copy of the note you sent with the changeling? I gave up trying to focus on the paper. Well, of course I made a copy. It's an official document after all. Jigsaw saw down with a thump. She released the paper and I caught it in my magic before it had a chance to blow away. She lowered her head until her muzzle was nearly touching her chest and mumbled, I'm sorry. What? No, Jigsaw, you have nothing to be sorry about. You're not used to... I waved a hoof around in a vague gesture. All this, monsters, travel, stupid princess stuff. I never used to understand when Celestia did something I thought was illogical or just plain dumb in the name of politics. So when I let that monster go, you had to be thinking that I was crazy. And on top of that, sending a note? I can see how you... Oh, stop it, Twilight. Jigsaw looked up and I could see she was on the verge of tears. You trusted Celestia, didn't you? Even when you didn't understand. But I didn't trust you. That note was probably one of the sweetest things anyone has ever done for me. I can't believe I was angry at you for not killing an intelligent creature. Even if it was an overgrown tick. Wait, you think the note was sweet? I thought back on what I had written and couldn't find any sweetness in it. Unto HRM Queen Chrysalis of the Changeling Swarm. Greetings from HSH Princess Twilight Sparkle of Equestria. Your Majesty, since the late unpleasantness in Canterlot, it has been assumed that yourself and your subjects would be sufficiently wise enough to realize that choosing ponies as a focus of your attentions would be a very bad idea, but as of tonight I now have direct and personal evidence that this is not the case. So, if I may be so bold, I wish to explicitly inform your Majesty that to target any ponies in the future would be very unwise indeed. As a pony who has defeated Nightmare Moon in Discord, among many others, I will take a very personal interest in seeking direct retribution for any further such incidents. And you will forgive me if I put too fine a point on the matter. If your subject had injured the pony she attacked tonight in any significant way, I would have ripped open your festering hive and done such unspeakable things to your royal person that all civilized beings would spit on the ground in utter disgust and horror at the mention of my name for generations to come. I earnestly hope that this missive will completely clarify the matter and that there will be cordial relations between our people in the future. Yours absolutely sincerely, Princess Twilight Sparkle. Jigsaw sniffed and wiped the hoof across her eyes. Yes, it was sweet. Then she gave me a wan smile. For a given value of sweet. Oh, maths-related jokes. I guessed she was going to be alright. Well, I still feel like I should apologize for something, I told her. She nodded and said, and I know I need to apologize for being pointlessly angry and jealous about the whole thing. Then why don't we just take the exchange of apologies as a given and get on with our expedition? We're getting a pretty late start as it is. Her equipment and supplies rose from the ground and began sorting into the various pockets of her saddlebags. Sounds good to me. Wait, jealous? We appeared in a small plaza near the edge of the ruins. We had examined it from the opposite rim of the canyon with my spyglass and a detection spell, and it had seemed to be perfectly safe as a point for materialization. It was a bit small, and the tumbled buildings around it gave cover for creatures that I might have missed with my detection spell, but it was the best place to teleport to given all the variables. As we emerged from the interstitial void, I guided the corona of dissipating magical energy into a shield spell around us, thereby saving a considerable amount of energy and giving us near-instant protection. That's a neat trick, Jigsaw commented. Thank you, I beamed. Now, let's take a closer look at these buildings. But shouldn't we head right for the library? We've wasted half the morning as it is. Just go charging in and to trust our reflexes to save us from traps and ambushes? Jigsaw hesitated. You do know that there are nowhere near so many traps and such in real ruins, right? A.K. Yearling tends to exaggerate. Of course, but I like being thorough and meticulous. I gave her a slow grin. Besides, wouldn't you feel silly if we ran into ceiling alligators? She couldn't help but smile back, but she waved a hoof at the surrounding half-walls and rubble. No ceilings, she remarked dryly. Fine, I sighed and dropped the shield. Jigsaw held up the map and turned it to match orientation with the ruins. I never understood why ponies do that, by the way. The library is that way, but it looks like the easiest route will be down that street. I swept one wing out in that direction. Lead the way. I kept a little behind Jigsaw, scanning the ruins with brief bursts of magic. There were a few small creatures scuttling around, but nothing more than that. I had time to admire the intricate carvings on the stones, mostly abstract and decorative, but every once and a while I spotted a fragment of a figurative relief and, once, a full sculpture of a unicorn's head, as though the slab it adorned had fallen over and was upside down. Twilight, Jigsaw said after we had been walking for about 10 minutes. Yes? This place is a lot bigger than I had thought from studying the map. How many ponies do you suppose lived here? I did some quick mental calculations. Well, given the apparent density of the housing we've observed so far, and assuming it's typical of the rest of the city, I would estimate between 4,700 and 5,000. Why? Well, she looked back at me uncertainly. There are some things about this place that seem odd. How so? Professor Sharphoff dates this place to the early classical era, and everything I've seen here supports that. Which means there would have been an UA ratio of about 1 to 5. Sorry, I told her. I'm not really an archaeologist, I just put on a pit helmet. Urban to agrarian ratio, she explained. That means how many farmers are needed to support one town dweller. In the ECE, it was about 5 farmers to every town dweller, so... She looked at me and raised an eyebrow. Roughly 25,000 farm ponies were needed to feed the ponies in the city. It wasn't until after I'd said it out loud that I realized why that was so strange. And there would have to be... I waved my hoof at the barren desert beyond the canyon rim. Okay, Earth ponies were great at getting stuff to grow in harsh conditions, e.g. Appaloosa, but that was ridiculous. Jigsaw nodded. Exactly. Okay, maybe there are some 80-odd villages buried out there in the sand, but even if this area was a lot wetter, they would still have to cover a really large area to grow enough food. Something should still be visible. That is odd. And there's another thing. She swept a hoof at the walls around us. Have you noticed the carvings? Yes, they seem very skillfully done. Unicorns. Yes? There was something I'd missed. What a strange feeling. They're all unicorns. Every carving that features a pony has a horn. Oh, you're right. I shrugged. That is a little odd, but lots of cities have a predominance of one type of pony, so perhaps... No. Jigsaw interrupted me, shifting into full lecture mode. It was actually quite charming. In the ECE they were obsessive about being egalitarian. With the tribes having united within living memory, every pony was trying to outdo each other to show how unbigoted they were. If they put up a statue of a famous unicorn, there would be a Pegasus and an Earth pony right next to it. A mural or mosaic that depicted a crowd scene would have exactly the same number of ponies from each tribe. Trust me on this, Twilight. This isn't just art, it's downright bizarre. Then it hit me. Yes, I'm a polymath, an expert in many fields, most particularly magic and magical theory. I also have a working knowledge of an even larger number of disciplines. But that doesn't mean I am familiar with all the endeavors of pony kind, nor do I have an aptitude for a great number of things. And thanks to a very dear friend of mine, I am painfully aware that among the things I am terrible at, art may be at the top of the list. Oh no! Rarity gasped. Dear, don't climb up the bunting like that. Here, let me... She took the streamers out of my grasp and began to rearrange them along the side of the hall. I had volunteered to help her decorate the hall in my castle where she was holding a get-together, she called it a soiree, with some of her important clients. I couldn't see much difference in the arrangement, but it was her party. I turned to the flowers and began setting out the vases on the tables. There was a little half-suppressed squeak from behind me. I turned to see Rarity biting her lower lip. She had been very patient with me. She carefully explained to me about the 3-level effect, and then I got it wrong by putting the candles in ascending order. Isn't that the most organized way? But I had to give up and admit defeat when she looked over at the way I had set out the first 3 vases on the end table, tallest in the center and the lowest nearer the door. And she said, "Oh dear, no, those colors don't complement at all." She was so afraid I would be offended, but I just laughed it off and said, "Let's face it, Rarity, I'm aesthetically blind. I'll ask a couple of the palace staff to come down and help out." So even though I'd examined the illustration of the Celestia relief 100 times, I'd never noticed. I yanked the book out of my saddlebags and flipped it open to the right page. Yes, Prince's artistically incompetent Twilight had missed the glaringly obvious. All the ponies were unicorns. There were some mules, cows, and even a couple of griffins mixed in, but not a single Earth pony or Pegasus. I groaned in embarrassment and dropped my forehead to the page, hiding my face. Twilight?" Jigsaw asked hesitantly. "Is everything okay?" "Yes. No, I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "I suppose it's time I showed this to you. You're going to see it anyway once we get to the library. It's just that it drives me to the edge of panic whenever I even think about it." Jigsaw walked toward me with a look of concern on her face. "Hey, it's okay. Is it those pages in the journal you didn't want me to look at?" I nodded. "Yes, and I should have shown them to you earlier. I should have trusted you. I stomped the ground in frustration, sending up a puff of dust. "I'm such a moron." Jigsaw chuckled. "Whatever else you may be, Your Highness, you are most certainly not a moron. Besides..." The smile fell from her face and she hesitated before continuing. "If it's a Tyrant Celestia picture you're worried about, I've already seen it. It's not that big a deal." You... I went looking for the copy of the notes this morning. I couldn't sleep and I just wanted... I don't know. I was just upset. Jigsaw lowered her head and turned a bit away from me. The note was stuck in the book, at that page. Her head sunk even lower. I'm sorry I disobeyed you. I took a deep breath. I took 3 deep breaths. It's all right, Jigsaw, I told her. We are partners on this expedition and I should have trusted you from the start. I just didn't want this. I thumped the book with a hoof. To get out, Celestia portrayed as evil? What would Pony think? I considered her words for a moment. But you said it's not a big deal. Why is that? The Tyrant Celestia thing? She asked. I nodded. Well, it isn't that uncommon. I've seen dozens of them. Twilight? Twilight? Oh my goodness, are you alright?